Eli Manning not going to start this week. He's going to be benched for Geno Smith, putting his consecutive start streak to an end. Jenny, I'll start with you. What do you make of this move by the Giants here?
I think it's the clearest signal yet that there will be a total house cleaning at the season's end. You know, it's not Ben McAdoo's team anymore. It's not Jerry Reese's team anymore. It's not Eli Manning's team anymore. They're planning to start anew, and they want to have some sort of evaluation. It's not about playing Geno Smith. It's really about seeing Davis Webb. And, you know, whatever happens in the future, I think they want to have some kind of game film on Webb. So if they bring a new regime in, which I think is likely at this point, they'll have something to go on based off of what Webb might be. But yeah, I mean, I think they basically said our intent the rest of the season is not to win games. Our season is lost anyway. We're eliminated from the playoffs. So our only objective now is to evaluate what's on the roster.
And it's another clear sign too that, you know, we'll be looking at the next era of Giants football at that particular position too. We know it's not Geno Smith. I think the only surprise here really is that it's Geno starting. I think maybe you would have expected that Davis Webb would be starting. Maybe by not starting him, you take a little bit of the pressure off of him and you can put him in better situations whenever you decide to put him out there in the game. But I don't think there's any question now. Like, remember these names: Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield. The Giants are clearly going to be in the market for their next quarterback after this season, and getting a read on Davis Webb will give them at least an idea of how much flexibility they have at the position going forward, because I don't know if Davis Webb's the future, but at the very least I think they need to find out, can he be a competent starter in the short term? Maybe that gives them some flexibility not to have to select a quarterback in 2018, but this is clearly a move with an eye towards the future. And I don't think it's hard to look at this and say it's probably ownership driven.
So with Davis Webb being the guy that they do need to evaluate, then Albert, why not start Davis Webb when they already know what they have in Geno and it's not a guy you can build your team around?
I mean, I think the only thing I can really think of here is that you don't want to put the pressure on the kid. And so maybe it takes a little pressure off of him, having him come off the bench. You know, at least then you can see the flow of the game and how things are going. And maybe you don't want to get him knocked around early in the game or generate some situations that are better for him. I think everybody knows what Geno Smith is. Geno Smith's not going to be the long-term answer for the Giants. And so eventually you're going to want to get a read on what Davis Webb is in 2017 and what he might be in 2018. And so I would expect that by the end of the year, we're going to see Davis Webb starting games. It's just, this is probably a way to ease him into that without throwing him out there and having him, because there's a lot that goes into the role of starting quarterback too. You're the one who's up there answering questions on Wednesday, and you're leading the team through meetings on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And so, you know, there's a lot that goes in during the week to being the starting quarterback. Geno's done that before. And by maybe putting the pause button on that for now, they can ease him into the role a little easier.
And to this point, you know, Geno and Davis Webb have only taken scout team reps. Ben McAdoo said that last week, that they were splitting the scout team. So it is hard to kind of start a game when, you know, for the majority of the season, you've really just been running scout team, which are plays drawn up for you. You don't really have to make any decisions there. So I think that that's probably a reason. But you know what you said about knowing what you have in Davis Webb, and if he can be a short-term, you know, starter, if it doesn't go your way in the draft for a guy you want, is an interesting point. That's why I always thought the most likely answer was that Eli would be here in 2018 for one more season. You try to see if you can, you know, bring in another guy, groom someone behind him, sort of like, you know, Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes situation, maybe make a switch at some point in time. But I always thought the likeliest scenario was that Eli would be with the Giants for one more year. So this is really a shock.
And just two things to put a bow on that. First, I think part of it is that you do have offensive line issues, and that's been an issue going back well beyond this year. And so if early in a game the pass rush is getting through and hitting the quarterback, better that quarterback maybe be Geno Smith than be Davis Webb taking those hits. And then I think the second part of this, again, is if you are going to have the flexibility on your roster where you don't have to force it in 2018, that's a good thing. Because a lot of teams will go into a certain draft class and say, we don't like any of these guys. We don't think any of these guys are the future. The last position that you want to be in as a franchise, and we're talking looking forward now for the Giants, the last position you want to be in is to have to force a quarterback pick in a single year. That's how you wind up with Christian Ponder. You know, like that's how the Vikings wound up with Christian Ponder. And so I think by doing this, you at least maybe get a read on Davis Webb and see, okay, if we go forward with Eli for another year, we've got that, and then maybe we have another layer of depth in Davis Webb if you do determine he can play.
Well, we saw Eli getting very emotional talking about this, and he said he was given the option to start for the first series to keep his streak intact, which is kind of strange. He said no thank you to that. Jenny, what do you think the future is for Eli now, since it's not looking like it's going to be that smooth transition you mentioned?
Yeah, his future is not in New York, so then you have to start to think about what other options are. The two teams that come to mind the most would be his brother's second team, the Broncos, and obviously Jacksonville, where he has the connection to Tom Coughlin. So I think, either of those teams are, win now in certain phases. I mean, both of them have built strong defenses and could just drop in a guy like Eli Manning and be better than they are this season. So I think those are the two most logical places. But yeah, I mean, he has that no trade clause in his contract, but there are a few options here. And at this point, it's clear he would be more likely to waive that no trade clause because it's clear they do not want him to continue to be the starter here in New York.
I'm going to just tap the brakes on that a little bit because we just don't know who's going to be making the decisions in New York this year too. And so it's certainly possible, like say a Josh McDaniels comes in and says the best thing for the franchise is to have Eli Manning starting for the next 2 years while we go and find a young guy. It's possible that a new decision maker comes in and makes the decision, I want to hang on to Eli Manning at least in the short term, again, to give yourself some of that flexibility going forward. And I think the other thing we can't rule out here, and we saw it happen last year with Tony Romo. Romo went through this whole process and the whole and it was almost like he's divorcing himself from the Cowboys, and he'd only worn that star in his helmet. And he eventually just came to the determination, you know what, I'd rather retire. I know Eli Manning puts value in his legacy with the Giants. And I know he puts value in the idea of being with one franchise for his entire career. And he saw the emotional toll it took on his brother to go through the whole divorce from the Colts. So if this was it, and let's assume that this is it, if the new decision maker comes in and says there's not a place for you here anymore, Eli, you wonder if he goes through that process and maybe retirement's on the table too, because he does put that sort of value on playing his entire career for one team.